and step into that include, but again that's an empty file, so there's nothing in there to step into. So let's use step over now, and I could step over execution as we've seen before, and I could go through and see every iteration of this loop. But that's going to take a long time, and perhaps I still want to see how the code is executing and see what's happening, but I want to do that a little bit faster. So I can use the shortcut key. So by hovering over, I can see the shortcut key is F6. So I'm just going to press F6 and hold that down. And you can see now how fast that the FusionDebug is able to loop through these. You can see that you can get many lines of code per second, and that it becomes very useful for debugging, because you can get to the point that you're interested in much faster by simply just holding down the F6 key. So let's just resume execution of that, because remember resuming goes to the next breakpoint, and because I'm looping over, I'm just going to pull out here. So let's remove the breakpoint and click resume, and we see that the page runs to completion. So let's go back and have a look at source code lookups. So remember when we first set up the application, I said that the one of the functions of FusionDebug is that it allows you to have many different files in different locations, and they can be in different locations on the server to the development machine. I can have those set up as different projects in Eclipse, and we still need to be able to debug those. So we handle that with the source code lookup system. And remember, they were available if I click Edit Railo and then source code lookup. We can see here that we defined those earlier. So let's see what this actually means. We have a very good page on our website. If I just go back to the FusionDebug homepage and click on Feature Focus, and if we scroll down to the bottom of this page, then we see Source Code Lookup tab, and clicking Read More, we can see that it explains what I actually mean when different projects and different folders. So sometimes you'll have a setup where you have maybe a tags folder or an includes folder, and it lives in a different location between the server and your machine. And this is perhaps what it could look like. You could have folders within subfolders. You could have any type of layout that you can imagine, and you can use the source code lookup tool to define where each of those lives. So let's have a look at an example of that running. So here inside this folder, I've just created a simple application CFC, and inside that I have a mapping for my special include folder, and that maps to this folder here. So let's have a look at the index.cfm, and inside it I'm going to include a folder called display time. So this my special include folder is actually a link to this project, and this this CFM file there, the display time. So if I just set toggle line breakpoint up here, and I can toggle those on and off using that, or I can also just double click there to create a breakpoint. And let's refresh the page, then we'll see that again it pops out at this point. It stops execution for me, tells me that I'm at this line, and let's start using the step over button, and then I get to the next line, and this says that it's going to include a folder. So let's use step into, and again step into will go into this include folder. I don't have it open at the moment, but it will open it for me. So step into, and it's opened up that file for me and told me what line in this file I'm currently at. So here we go. I'm now at this line, and click again. And what happens when we click step over and we're at the end of the file is it will jump back to the location in the calling file where I am. So step over again, and it follows the entire flow of the application. So again, we're back here at the debugging screen and we can see that. So let's just resume execution. And we see that the page completes normally. So I haven't changed any part of the code. All I've had to do is go in and set a breakpoint. So it can be very, very easy to step through applications that have multiple projects, that have files in many different locations. It makes it very easy to track down where the problems are, because you can follow the flow of the execution and break out at the important parts that you're interested in debugging. So let's have a look at view variables and scopes. So here I've just created a struct and I've dumped that out onto the screen. Let's have a look at the code. So again, I have a little application CFC just to give me an application scope, and here I've set a variable inside the application scope. I've also set another one inside server scope, and so on. So we can see that I've set quite a few different variables up here. So let's put a breakpoint there on the very first line of execution and refresh. So at the moment, no code has run. So if I go into application scope and myvar, then we'll see that we've broken out at this point where only the first line was run. So if I click step over, we'll get to the next line and go into server, then we'll see that that value is 81, and that's because when it breaks out, it hasn't reached this line of code yet. It's at the beginning of this line of code. It hasn't actually executed it yet. So if I step over, then now that line has executed, and we'll see that the value changes. If we go into URL scope, we'll see that there's nothing in there at the moment, but I step over, which would execute this line, setting that variable, and we now see that there are variables set. So if I step over some more lines of this code, then we'll see that these will get set. Now this struct here, my struct, it's not scoped, but that really will go into the variable scope. So we can see here, this is where the my struct lives. You see on the left hand side of the dump of the previous execution, we see that we get lots of null values in the first key element of the struct, and here inside FusionDebug we see that like so. So because they're null values, they're empty, we don't display them, and that means that it makes it very easy to find the entries in this array that do have values. So here we can see the equivalent of this first key elements 1, 2, 3 and 100, which are set up here in the code, whereas in a dump we'd have to scroll down all the way to the bottom and find there's the 100. So it makes it very easy to find elements. So let's have a look at some of the other features. Let's just go back to the menu and expression watcher. So the expression watcher is this feature up here. So we have a window called expressions, and let me open up this. So here we have a slightly more complicated page, so it's doing some looping, and then based on an expression which is I to the power of 2 equals 16. So when I to the power of 2 is 16, then it will output something extra. So we don't always know what that's going to evaluate to. This could be quite a complex calculation, and we're not always going to know what that's going to be. So what we can do is, if we right click and then choose watch expression, we see that that expression appears up here in this window. And now if I click here and toggle a breakpoint and refresh the page, it drops out of execution here, and it tells me that I to the power of 2 is equal to 1. And if I resume execution, and what that says is continue until you hit another breakpoint, we see that it comes back and hits this breakpoint again, and now I can see that I to the power of 2 is 4. and run again, and again, and again.